Welcome to The B Word, a women's lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Katie Ploss. I'm a school psychologist, women's wellness coach, a doula, and the founder of BU, a women's wellness community. I created The B Word to share my stories, knowledge, and training to help you navigate the everyday challenges of being a woman. We discuss everything from navigating dating and relationships, parenting, building a career, to just finding what you're passionate about and figure out who you are meant to be. At The B Word, we aim to destigmatize mental health challenges, grow, heal, and empower you to be your most authentic self. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The B Word. I am excited for this week's episode. We're going to dive right into it. I have Jenny Greene with me this week. She is an author, and I had to have her on the show, and I found out the title of her book, which is called Brain Bitch: How I Quiet My Inner Mean Girl. And I am just so excited to have her here and share about that, because we just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about this with our other guests, you guys, if you don't remember. So we're going to talk about our inner mean girl and that, how do we quell that brain bitch? Jenny is a certified yoga teacher and has been since 2016, and she's sharing with us today the transformative power of these practices and guiding others toward inner peace and freedom. She channels her creativity into words, creating narratives that inspire and empower, and her life is just a testament to the strength that lies in quiet introspection and the joy of pursuing one's passions. Her story, as she's going to share with us today, is an invitation to all who seek to overcome inner turmoil and step into the light of self-love and acceptance. Welcome, Jenny, to The B Word.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having me. I'm so honored.
So excited for you to be here. So tell me, how did you come up with the title of your book? Because I was so excited that a fellow lady was leaning into the word bitch and re-empowering this word.
That's right. A fellow bad bitch.
Ah,
So it's really interesting. The story of Brain Bitch is my personal story. So you get to know me really well in the book. It's a self-help memoir. And it's really this nickname I gave to my ego brain. So I would deal with these thoughts and be like, wait a minute, is that me? Isn't that me? And that was after yoga teacher training. And I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. But
yeah.
as I was working with this inner voice, I would say to myself, such a bitch, but not to me, to the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just clicked. It was like, oh, it's my brain bitch. And I just started nicknaming her that. And so whenever I would be struggling with something, I would tell my husband, it's just my brain bitch. And so it just got to be a thing in our household. Calm your brain bitch down when my brain was going off the rails.
I love
So
this. And I love the concept too of taking some of the ownership off of it, or the shaming piece off of it, giving it a name and an identity of itself so that you can more easily identify when you're doing that.
absolutely. That's a big premise of the whole story of the book is the separation between your ego brain and then your soul self.
Yeah.
And realizing that who you are is perfect and enough and all the good things. And this other part that sometimes can be really cruel and mean to you and sometimes to other people, but hopefully not so much, that's not your true nature. And so when you can start to separate that, I think Michael Singer talks about it as being like an inner roommate.
Mhm.
And so that really helped in giving some sort of, nickname or identification that feels separate from this is me and this is also me, but it's not who I
Well, it's
am.
parts of you, right? And working on how do we integrate, right, into ourselves in order to connect with that core of who we really are. And I think that we get away from that at very young ages,
Yeah.
especially as women. I think men and women experience this, but I think as women, we are overly socialized into kind of disregarding our intuition, our authenticity, to being people pleasers, to just going with the flow and not seeming difficult or whatever
Right.
adjectives that are used to describe us at times. And so I think it's so important. How did you share with us a little bit about your story? How did you start to realize that you were disconnected from that authentic self within? You said you started with yoga teacher training, but was it even before that that you were experiencing difficulty with that?
I was experiencing tons of difficulty for most of my life, like
Yeah.
from teenage years into my 30s, really. It really got bad in my parenting years,
Mm,
specifically, I think, because I wanted to be like a great wife and a great
yeah.
mom, and nobody's perfect. And I would just have so much guilt and shame every time something seemed to go wrong or I didn't seem to be as good as what it said in the parenting books. And then I also had this physical response after my second son was born. I started having panic attacks and
Mm,
they got really debilitating. So I've got anxiety, I've got guilt, I've got shame going on.
yeah.
And then I have an underlying story my entire life since I was like a toddler of I'm not enough.
Mm,
And so I just, all those things started really culminating in my mid to late 20s and into my 30s to where when I found yoga, I knew something was changing as I practiced because I was becoming calmer, but I didn't understand why. Like the manifestation was there of the benefits of yoga, but I didn't really get it. I just knew something was helping. And that's what interested me into going to yoga teacher training is okay, what is this voodoo magic that yoga is that I'm starting to have be calmer and yell at my kids less and maybe like myself a little bit more. And so that was really how I got to this recognition then was, through the study of Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga, through uh, deep dives into yoga philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, and just things like that. And then with like minded people in
mm.
that arena, because prior to that, I'd been really deeply involved in the church. And I always like to say I'm not anti church at all, but it wasn't really for me. It was actually making everything worse. Like the stories that my brain put to everything I heard from the pulpit just added to the guilt, it just added to the shame. And so it wasn't healing me like it's supposed to when you go to church. It was
Ah,
actually causing me a lot more pain. So when I broke away from that and got deeper into my practice, I was able to start making some strides in the right direction.
yeah. Oh, so I resonate with so much of what you said. And I think for me, so I discovered yoga. It's been 15 years now, maybe a little more longer. I'm getting
Right?
old, maybe 17 years or 20. I don't know. It's been a long time. And prior to that, I was a dancer. And so I loved like group fitness and like group classes and stuff. But yoga, the one thing that I didn't love about dance is that I'm just not like very physically very flexible. And so I was always not like very weary of doing yoga because I was like, I cannot stand
Mhm.
on my head. I cannot do all these things that they say yoga is. And so when I discovered yoga, it was actually in like a stress management class in high school. And we did it every day. And then I started to realize it was so much more. I started to experience the voodoo magic that you're talking about of just being calmer and like more mentally well. And I was like, interesting. So I started doing it more. And over my adult life, it's definitely always been like my go-to practice. And I think I share a similar story that I've had to really heal through is that I'm not enough. And
Mhm.
so that's the beauty of yoga is that when you're on your mat and you're on like these little four corners in the world and the tiny space you're taking up, you can express your practice in any way and it is enough. Like there
Yeah.
is no judgment, there is no pressure to perform, which is so different than every other fitness class that
Yeah.
you'd ever take,
Absolutely.
and what makes it so unique. And honestly, though, I've gotten really good at applying yoga to other group classes I take. I'm the first
Okay.
person that's gonna modify or do what's right for my body. And I've been empowered to do that through doing yoga for so long and
Yeah.
really being able to listen to that inner voice, that true voice. And I feel like in a yoga practice, it is such if you really connect with it, it becomes a very spiritual experience. And you do connect with your like authentic true self and you learn how to quiet all those other parts of you, like this brain bitch that you're talking about, right? Like
Right.
you get really quiet and centered and it takes a long time of practicing yoga to get to that, but it is truly magical once you do. And I
Yeah.
think people don't realize that don't aren't familiar with yoga and aren't familiar with the philosophy of it, that it is so much more than stretching. It's so much more than even like the concept of mindfulness and meditation. I think people gets a little bit oversaturated and people don't really fully understand how it can change your life with just learning how to breathe and how to move in a way that's authentic to you.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that. I like to say your yoga mat's where you take your life lessons and then you go apply them when you step off of the mat.
Yes.
And meditation for me, I give several meditation ideas in the book, but it was really difficult for me being someone that had such terrible anxiety. It took me a good year of just only being able to meditate like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes at a time. Oh, that's not working. I got to do a guided meditation because I can't even be quiet with myself that long.
Yeah.
So, like you said, some of this stuff takes time. Like this book, it's funny. I do have the ebook format, but I really hope that people, when they get the paperback, because I think this one of these you got to come back to. It's and dig into time and again and use the tools over and over. Because if you just do them once, they'll help. But this really, it's a practice. It's something you keep doing
Yeah.
long term. And then
Yeah.
the way I talk about, you're never going to get rid of the brain bitch. She's not going to go away. So we
No.
have to learn how to quiet her, work with her, live with her in our mind, and be at least our authentic self, be the one that's in charge instead of the brain bitch being in charge.
I think that's so incredibly important to keep in mind as we have this conversation about any type of practice or mindfulness is that it is over months and years and you
Yes.
are and it's a but it's I don't know. I don't know how to describe this and let me think about it. It's work, but it's also and in some days when you do it, it doesn't feel like you did anything. I have definitely gone to yoga classes where I have been like, I was totally distracted. I had no idea what how I was even focused. I don't think I was even breathing. And I've been to many yoga classes where the teacher will be like, if you're not breathing, you're not doing yoga. I don't care if you're like doing whatever, a pose on your head or whatever. And it was just, it is, but as I done it and I've been more consistent with it, I'll look back over months at a time and I'm like, oh my God, but I've totally changed my mood over time or like trends. And
Right.
it's such a subtle thing. And I think that a lot of people that need those immediate results, we're also in a culture where like we need everything to be immediate and in our face or I'm bored.
Right.
And yoga for me has also been just a way to get away from screens. Like I am so
Yeah.
as a millennial, like I'm constantly on my phone, I'm constantly on the computer. And when I go into it, like, that's a sacred space. When I go in there, like, I do not ever bring my phone. I won't even wear like an Apple Watch. Like, I want to be completely disconnected from everything external and completely connected in here. And just
Yeah.
even doing that, even if you don't do anything in a yoga class, but you're just being very mindful and intentional, that's a huge improvement from went before you walked in the door. And so
Right.
I encourage people all the time to just try it. So many people do you notice this? Because this is a lot of what your work surrounds that people are like either very into yoga or very not into yoga. Like they are like totally against it.
Yeah. There's not much middle ground. And the
Yeah.
people who are curious in the middle ground, they usually have some excuse. Like, I am not flexible. And I'm like, what you just said. If you just sit on your mat and breathe intentionally, you're doing yoga. You can combat those. But yes, people either love it or they just don't know that they're going to love it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people also don't really know like all of the physical benefits that do come from it because we're not like doing I don't know. A lot of times people, though, don't know that there's different types of yoga also, like, people,
Yes.
like, either think that, like, when I'm talking about yoga, they like, in their mind, they think of a yin or restorative, which I
Oh,
love
I
and
love
are
that.
also very like, those are very difficult in a different way, like, those are really difficult for your
I think you
mind.
might. Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
But a lot of people I find that aren't experienced with yoga don't really understand like what power yoga or like more of a very high intensity like vinyasa flow when you're moving, like your heart rate is going, like you are sweating.
Yeah.
And I think people don't know that there's such a range and a spectrum of what type of like yoga class you could take or experience you could have with it. And so I find that I've had to educate a lot of people about that too is that there's such a range and there's something for everybody when it comes to
Right.
yoga, and that's what I love about it.
And that's really something we put on it more in our culture. Ancient yoga is yoga. And
You're right.
we've come up with all of these different variations, which is beautiful because then there is something that everybody feels like they can fit in. But to your point of people not knowing about the different types of yoga as an instructor. And you're about to teach a power vinyasa class, and somebody walks in and they're like, I'm just coming back from a such and such surgery, and my doctor said I could benefit from yoga. And
You're
I'm
like,
like, but maybe you don't like class today. Like, get you in like restorative or gentle. And that another thing that I think people might not realize about yoga is they do think of it as just like a stretching or a workout. And really, the ancient yogis, it was about meditation. And what they realized was people didn't sit still very well. And so they had this came up with, and I think just universal consciousness probably gave them what they needed to know, the ways to move the body so that we were opening up and causing stretches and the ligaments and tissues and all that that released certain things that were bound in the body. Then, when that had happened, we were able to sit and be still. And Shavasana, you might hear teachers be like, oh, that's the most important pose, or it's the best pose, the one where you just lay on the floor at the end. But really it is, because it's the integration of, okay, I've got into my body and I've moved some stuff around, some of that stuck energy.
Mhm.
And now I can sit and be with myself. And so I think, going back to the book too, if people are like, I don't know, I don't think I have a brain bitch. All you got to do is sit quiet for a little bit
Really.
and notice what's going on in your mind. And you'll be like, oh, there is, I'm not trying to think right now. And things are coming up and thoughts. And then you go, and some of it's not, some of it's helpful, right? We need to remember to change out the laundry, or like those parts of our ego brain, the thinking brain are great. But then it's like the judgments and the harshness and that stuff. And that'll pop up for you on your yoga mat real quick for some people. Like,
Oh my
oh,
God.
look at
Yes.
her. I can't do that. Or it takes that time to realize, oh, I don't have to.
Yeah, and I think too, like, even someone that is pretty well practiced like myself, like this was in the last year. I was in a yoga class, but it sparked such a profound reflective practice for me in that I was in a hot yoga. And so this hot yoga, it was a vinyasa. And I practice at Yoga 6, which I used to actually. I haven't, I go somewhere else now, but I used to. And their hot yoga sequence is the same sequence. And I love
Oh,
this
okay.
hot yoga sweet sequence, but I know it. I could do it at home alone. Like, I've done
I
it so many
gotcha.
times,
Yeah.
and the instructor wasn't cueing it fast enough for my liking this particular day. Like, I wanted to flow, and I
Yeah.
was there to move, and I was not there to hold the poses.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to get frustrated. I was like, "I am trying to move. Stop. Like, why are you holding these cues so long? They don't normally do that." And I was getting like really that kind of brain bitch like toward the instructor.
Mhm.
And I once we started moving and I started getting toward the end of the practice and I had released whatever that need for movement was, I was like, "That's really interesting." And it caused me to prompt myself of what was I trying to move away from or trying to release so
Yes.
quickly? Like, why am I trying to flow through this so fast? And what is the problem with holding this pose longer? And it just helped me start to ask myself these really deep reflective questions. And I walked away like from this class like so much more settled and grounded and able to sit still and be still.
Yeah.
And we all need that from time to time. Like you said, and this doesn't go away. I've been doing practicing yoga for 15 years. It doesn't just disappear. I'm not like healed. I wish that I was like I don't know, like like this guru who's like constantly zenned out. I absolutely
Right.
not. I'm the least chilled person ever. However, I think that's why I love yoga so much because it's one of the very few things that makes me feel chill.
And I think it's a good conversation to have about it too, because there's so much buzzwords around like mindfulness and
Mhm.
meditation, all the things today. There's all these, and I hope that the way that my book ends, I won't spoil it for anybody, but I hope that people will understand that like you can't just pick up one book and be like, this is going to be it. This is going to be my fix, because it's inner work. And so they're all great tools. But yeah, you just got to keep showing up for yourself and doing the work. So what I found was when I started becoming aware of this separate like voice, I just took it so seriously. Nobody has to do it like I did it. But I was so desperate to get rid of this constant battering in my head
Mhm.
that I felt like daily I was like peeling back layers of myself. Like you were just saying, what happened to you after that day on the mat, and just asking myself really hard questions when I would have a thought, instead of just stopping the thought or taking the thought captive, as some say. I would be like, where did that come from? Why do I think that way? I was like rewinding back to my childhood sometimes just to be like, I want to know the seed of that so that I can pluck it out and start over.
Yeah.
And I went through that like really intentionally for probably close to a year until I felt really emptied out.
Hmm.
And then I feel like it was like a rebuilding process, if you will, rediscovering who I
Yes.
really was, like allowing myself to come through. So it's funny now, even right down to how I dress is completely different from 5 years ago because I'm just more authentic. And I might look to somebody else like a wild hippie from the 70s. Some days when I step out of my house, that's how I feel my
Yeah.
best. And I'm like, I no longer care. But before, gosh, it would have just been, you can't wear that. You're going to embarrass your family. You're going to embarrass yourself. People are going to look at you. Don't you know that's not in style? All of those things would have went through my head. And so now when they do, I'm just like, I don't care what you have to say. Like I'm doing me.
So much time to shift our brains though from or so much intentionality, I should say,
Intentionality. Yeah.
is that it sometimes you can do this in no time at all. I think time is relative to everybody's experience, but it is
Sure.
intentionality. And I think it's shifting because even inherently, like the concept of I want to just quiet my mind or diminish these thoughts or make these types of thoughts go away. Inherently, we're judging ourselves for having the thought, like the
Right.
negative thoughts that come up. And when you just make, and it's such a subtle shift of becoming a curious observer of your
Right.
experience, like you're doing. Like, where does this come from? Why does this come up for me a lot? What do I need to learn here? And your brain starts to subtly shift with you of, oh, there doesn't need to be this rush or this like urgency to like to silence these thoughts because
Right.
you're it is an authentic part of you or it comes from a part of you that was probably in pain or hurt or whatever it is for everybody, trauma, just life experiences, being a woman, whatever. Being a parent can also
Right.
like really trigger these things, right? That need to be perfect, that need to not feel any type of failure or discomfort. And I think that people don't do that enough. Like, we don't just become curious observers. That's the other piece that yoga is a physical manifestation of that. Like, you're observing what your body can do, you're observing what limits it has, where you need to push forward and pull back. And it's so much more objective versus being in judgment of what you can and cannot do on a given day.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that in of itself is so healing, right? To give yourself the freedom because then you start to question and confront those other like preconceived notions and beliefs about how you should be in the world. Like you start to confront all of them. How you dress, how you talk, how you walk, whatever it is. And even what makes me care about how other people are going to perceive me. And usually it is this you're usually disconnected with who you really are. You're not sure how to showcase that part of yourself because you don't even know her.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like definitely one of the ones that I really struggled with was that disconnect from my true
Yeah.
authentic self. But you think about all the media we get and just from a very young age, like our parents and not they're not meaning to do anything harmful, but they're already trying to shape us and put labels on us at a very young age into what fits with how they had upbringing. But they have their own brain bitch and brain bastard that they're bringing to it and their own stuff. And then, so it's none of it's with blame. When my stories in my book, I try to do a really good job of pointing out no victimhood here, just recognition of facts of what happened and then how I experienced it between my ears and what that continued to do. Because really, are these situations, this is life, and we're supposed to let all that stuff flow through, right? Like experience it, learn something, let it go.
Mhm.
Experience it, learn it, let it go. But most of the time we experience it, we put some sort of label and meaning to it, we hold on to it, we overprocess it, then something comes up again and we label whatever went on before, we now put the rose colored or dark colored glasses, depending on what it is. And now that's going to happen again. It's not. This is a new experience. We should let that one come as it is and flow through. But instead, if it was a great one last time, we're like, this one's going to be great too. Now we've already got this expectation. or it was terrible last time. This is going to be terrible too. And so I talk about that a little bit in the book of our experiences start to create our reality going forward. And if we can also separate from that and be like, that was this experience, this is
Mhm.
new, and not allow our file cabinet to open back up and go, okay, what's going to happen from my previous file of what happened the last time in a similar situation?
It's so
Even on,
important. It's so critical, but and I think too for people that, maybe haven't done this work that much that are listening to this, it's you as much as you probably I know myself. I know that if I when I was starting this journey, I would wanna start there. I would
right,
wanna start with, "Okay, I just can't let all that other stuff bug me," or, "I can't let all that other stuff, all that baggage, all of those past internalized thoughts and feelings, I just gotta dump that and let it go." But you have to, like, actively let it go, whether it's through a physical expression like yoga, whether it's working with a coach or working through therapy or journaling, or like there has to be a certain act that you are doing to actively let that past stuff be released before you will not encounter the experience of internalizing and then letting it apply to all of your past experiences. Like a lot of people when they enter personal growth work, they just want to start with this is who I am and I'm moving forward, which is great. Love the enthusiasm,
right.
but there has to be some type of acknowledgement or reckoning with how you're going to release the stuff that you were carrying on your back all these years.
Yeah. Because we have, what is it? They say 6,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day, and that
Yeah.
most of them are repetitive.
Yeah.
So you can't just automatically be like, I'm just going to drop 50,000 thoughts that I've been having repetitively for the last 5 years
Right.
overnight. Like you do have to start to be aware of that cycle and then be like, okay, so this, and some of them serve you well. If you have great repetitive thoughts, absolutely hang on to those. We're not trying to wipe the slate clean necessarily. Some people might need to, but yeah, and these tools that we can use, I love therapy as well. It's sometimes just even talking and you have a conversation like this and you go, oh yeah, I see now.
Yeah.
But if you just try to figure it out on your own quietly, sometimes that doesn't work. So you got to try different modalities and see what works for you. That's why I include different things in the book as well. Try this, try that. And I acknowledge right up front what worked for me might not work for you. But I
Mm.
think that there's a good combo in there that would at least start to get people to think about it and be like, parts of that seem to work. What else would go along those lines that I could use or whatever? So
And I
I hope
think
it's a jumping off point.
it is. And I think it's a way to start asking yourself these questions. Like we were saying at the top of the episode about your experience with church. I had a similar experience with church in that it wasn't like super empowering for me. But however, I respect people that have had a very positive experience with church, have found
Absolutely.
like a sense of community around it, a sense of healing around it. A lot of people that have struggled with years and years of substance abuse find so much healing in the church and like reconnecting with their religion. And so I think that different modalities are going to connect with different people at different times for different
Yeah.
reasons. But it's really being willing to surrender to figuring it out and not being so tied to a timeline or a specific result or what or how it's supposed to look or feel, of just being willing to be open to ask those questions and admit that you don't know what you don't know when you're working on figuring it out.
Yeah, I love that. It's just a daily thing. Some days it'll go great, and some days not so much. And some days you'll work on it, and other days you're just gonna run around and you're gonna forget, and you're just following the brain wherever it takes you, and that's okay. It's a cycle of like up and downs, and hopefully the trajectory is more and more positive over time.
Exactly. And I think too, like I think as a society, we're just not used to thinking this way and like being willing to be so just like open and loosey goosey. Things need to have a definitive result. They need to have a definitive action that drives that result. And we cannot deviate from the formula. And that has limited people from being able to find their unique, authentic signature of how that's going to look. There's an endless
Yeah.
amount of methods available to us, really, especially now. Geez, with the
Yeah.
internet, you can try almost anything that you want to. But I think that there is this need for that immediacy and that this produces this and I have this much time to do it. And if I don't do it, then I need to try the next thing. And they don't give things they don't have that. We don't develop that critical thinking. I say
Right.
that all the time about like something totally unrelated to what we're talking about of like politics. People don't have, and when I listen to even watch the news or whatever about why people are doing what they do, why you're going to vote for what you vote for, why do you shop where you shop? Why do you do anything that you do? People don't really have a great answer for it. I didn't think
Right.
about it. This is what everybody else does. This is what I'm supposed to do at this age and where I live and with what I do. There's so many superficial reasons and we don't participate in these types of activities where we're like really getting deep with ourselves. People are really afraid to do that work.
I think I heard a phrase back many years ago. It was from a book, and I apply it differently, I think, than even the book was talking about, but it hit me this way. The question behind the question,
Mhm.
or like the why behind the why. So, like, why do you do something? And people give you an answer. Okay. Can you go like deeper why behind that? When you keep, like I said, the onion analogy of peeling back the layers and some people get stuck right after the first why because they're not thinking for themselves. The critical thinking has not happened. So they have a why, but it's a why they heard, like you said, on the internet, on TV, whatever. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, that seems right. Okay. That's it. And then, so I think that it's really been my experience that deconstruction of all of my belief systems was part of going back, like why. And then, oh, okay. So now when I rebuild, I'm going to rebuild with something that feels really like true and authentic and not like I have knowledge of why I'm going to choose this path for myself. So these are really important lifelong skills. And I think that to go back to your point, we're taught to, from a very young age, to set goals
Mhm.
instead of set intentions.
Mhm.
And there's a
Yes.
place for both of them for sure. And I touch a little bit on that in my book. If you're going to try to, I ran a marathon. I'll just share a little story from the book. I ran a marathon and I had a goal. I had a goal time that I wanted to do. And I wasn't a great runner, so it wasn't like crazy, but I did have a goal. And I got injured a week before the date of the marathon. And I did what every sane person would do. I went to the doctor and was like, shoot me up with cortisone, please. I'm going to run it anyways. And bought an expensive knee brace and showed up to the starting line. And I had trained for over 6 months. And it was not a fun experience for me because I'm not a great runner. And so I didn't meet my goal. Now, had I known about yoga and known about intention setting, I could have went into that. I have an intention to finish the race with a great attitude. I could have had things around how I was going to experience it and stuff that was within my control.
Mhm.
You can sometimes have both your goal and your intention, but if all you have is your goal, then we're just set up a lot of times for disappointment, or you were pushing for that next thing because we didn't quite hit that goal. But if we can have an intention and we can just show up for the experience, and we want to have this lovely meeting with Katie on the computer screen today and how it goes, no goal, then
Right.
we can really have this lovely exchange or this lovely experience. And even when it doesn't go lovely, we're not beating ourselves up so much over it because we didn't
Right.
hit the goal.
And I think it's so important too. I work with a lot of younger clients and a lot of my young clients struggle with the word goal and like that whole concept of goal setting. And I think there is this fear of talking in absolutes for a lot of kids where they're like, if I set a goal and I don't meet it, then I failed.
Yeah.
Versus if we set an intention, we are still meeting the need of holding ourselves accountable for something, because that's really what goals are. It's to hold you accountable for something, and I think
Sure.
really what in the intentionality piece speaks to is that even if we don't meet the exact result, we still have had this experience that has provided learning, insight,
Yes.
growth, and that's really what we're here to do on this earth is to grow, gain insight, and heal. And
Absolutely.
that is what our goal should be always. That is a non-negotiable. How it looks and how it manifests always is. And I think that's how I approach my work with young people too, because there is this pressure in our society like you need to perform to a certain level or your worth is in question. And I think even back to what you initially had been talking about, a lot of like your core wounds were around, I'm not enough. And I think so many of us experience have that core wound for a reason. That's how our society has been built, especially if we're in being in the US and capitalism and all that. Like you need to work hard and have something to show for it, right? Those and I think we love as humans to overgeneralize things. And I think that's why sometimes people one, overgeneralize things, but then put everything into categories. So I think this type of thinking that we're talking about just completely goes against the grain of how most of us were raised. It's like
Yeah.
you can't be so loosey goosey because you're never going to get anything done, which is absolutely not true. Think about all of the things that you have accomplished in the time that you've adopted this way of thinking. I have a list of accolades that anyone would look at a resume and be like, holy shit, like that's really impressive. How do you manage all of that? And it's really that I don't have these extremely stringent expectations of success and failure. I just am like looking at what I'm doing. It's mindfulness. I'm looking at what I'm doing right now and I'm taking one step forward and I'm not making it mean all the things I could make it mean and all the judgments I could make it mean about myself and my work. That took
Yeah,
so much work to untangle.
for sure. How did you, other than yoga, how do you think you untangled that to where you are today?
I did a lot of thought work too. So in addition to moving my body and like being more intentional from a physical and yoga was like such a huge piece of that, but learning how to know what true calm and like integration and authenticity feels like. I think yoga was about like the feeling of it. And then the thought work that I did was looking at the thinking part of it and deconstructing where my beliefs came from. So you were talking about the deconstruction of a lot of those
Awesome.
thoughts and some of what I looked at was more of a cognitive behavioral approach to it. So, like, how does my behavior, how does my feeling drive my behavior? How do my thoughts drive my feelings that drive my behaviors? And what are those behaviors producing as a result? And what actions do I need to take? And so it was a very much like a methodical step by step deconstruction of just a simple thought. Like,
Mhm.
I don't feel lovable or like this person is rejecting me or whatever it was that I was working on. But it was thought by thought and really looking at this
Nice.
practice of not accepting all of my thoughts as gospel truth.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Good.
and like the other thoughts of other people projected onto me, that's also not gospel truth. That's maybe their truth and their experience. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, but I'm gonna deconstruct my beliefs and what other people even project onto me. And so I think it was just this it was like a year of really, really being open to deciding that I could have
Yeah.
something different and that I could have a different result. It was hard. I think and also I don't know if this happened for you during your transformation, but it was almost like it started to build upon itself and this need to release. Just like it was like when it rains, it pours. So I was like managing like a really difficult experience circumstance. And I was doing really good at deconstructing my thoughts on that and having a lot of belief and hope and whatever. And then something else would happen. And then something else would happen. And I'm now looking back, I'm like, there was just this need for a ton of release around a ton of different beliefs and issues within myself that I had but it made it very hard to stay the course because it was like one thing after the other was happening.
Yes. And I think that is, first of all, I'll just go back. You talked about projection. I have 2 chapters on projection in my
Love
book.
this.
But I think that in my experience, it was exactly the same as yours. And I have an idea around that. I'm not going to say it's scientific or anything. But I think if you think about if you have a wall and you tear down the wall, now you see what is behind the wall. And now there's another wall. So you tear down that one. So as you start to do the work, this thing that was hidden back here just wasn't at the forefront. So we deal with this thing that's at the forefront. We're like, we're doing good on that. We got it. It feels like that's coming down. But then the psyche, the brain, whatever, it's like, oh, here's this thing we haven't dealt with in a while. And it brings up, and again, what we think about, we bring about kind of idea,
Yep.
even if we're subconsciously thinking about it, we don't even have to be aware of it. So now our brain is, oh, I'm going to make this situation come into play in life so we can figure out like what to do with that. And so there's the next one and you deal with that one. And so it is, that's why I like the term deconstructing because it feels like tearing down a building or something when it can be painful. A lot of those times, and I don't want to scare anybody from the work because what's at the other end of it is so
Oh,
worth it. It's
next
so
level.
worth it. So yeah, you're going to have days where you're like, I don't want to get out of bed after I did this work, or, my eyes are puffy from the ugly cry I just had, or whatever it looks like for, my hand hurts from journaling for an hour because I had to get that out, whatever it is. But as you feel more and more freedom and more of that joy and peace of who you really are shining through, you're always going to have stuff in life, but when it no longer has to have that same effect on you than it did before, it's so beautiful. And so I think it's always worth the work, but it can be scary to walk into it. And I say in my book, and I just want people to know, if it gets too much, that's where it's really good to have somebody come and help alongside and help you for a little bit, like therapy or whatever, so that someone can prop you up a little bit if it's too much to do on your own sometimes. But then when you're able to handle the work on your own and whatnot, then you can. And sometimes that ebbs and flows over time. But yeah, it's really important because I can't imagine. I hope I'd still be here, but I can't imagine where I'd be if I hadn't
Oh, I
got
know I
to this
wouldn't.
work.
I know I
You know,
wouldn't. I think for me, and I'm someone that's, like, very stubborn, so, like, I had to hit, like, rock bottom, and it was, like, either cease to live or do this work,
yes,
and so
me too.
I think that's for a lot of people, like, I think because this is scary, and I think a lot of people get so tied to their own chaos, like, it's comfort like, the comfort in the chaos or the
Mhm.
comfort in the dysfunction or the comfort in their own
Absolutely.
discomfort. I was I was very aware that what my patterns and my habits weren't necessarily healthy, but I was like, that's all I know. So I can not imagine deconstructing that because that would mean that I'd have to ask all these really hard questions. And when I started on this journey, it was so terrifying. I could not do it by myself. Like I had to have a lot of professional help, and I have no shame in that. I think that
Mm,
was
yeah.
so life changing in the best ways. And once I started to get on the path and I rediscovered that I did have this belief that I could have the type of integration and peace and joy that I have now. I had no idea though, like that it would be even better than what I could even imagine. And that's what I tell a lot of people that are in resistance is that whatever you think you are gonna have if you do this work, it's actually probably even better than that if you really commit to it. And
Yeah.
if you would have told me 4 or 5 years ago, like, where I'd be today, I would have laughed in your face, and I would have been like, "No, that doesn't even make sense. I have
Right.
no belief." And so, these things can always change, and you are always in the driver's seat of that. I think there's so much surrendering that has to happen during this experience, and you can feel out of control for a lot of it, which I know I did. I felt like I was just this act of surrendering, and I needed that so badly because I was trying to tightly hold on to everything. But I always had the control of that I was choosing to surrender, and I was choosing to
Oh, yeah.
see a different way, and that brought me a lot of peace during that time that was not very peaceful a lot of the time. This healing work is not peaceful. Doesn't feel healing in the moment. Healing feels like shit. It's like think about any surgery you've had or some procedure you
Yeah.
need to have done. You don't feel that usually, depending on what it is. You don't feel amazing walking out.
You're right. It
You
takes
know,
time,
it
but
hurts,
it hurts.
but in you look back and you heal and you do all the things and you're like, "Okay, that was worth it." It's the
Yeah.
same thing. We just don't it's not physical, it's not tangible, and we're just now, I think, as a human race, like, really collectively coming into this work, and it's so exciting to be on the frontier part of it. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many naysayers, and I think too, I'm sure you talk to a lot of people that are very skeptical. They're like, "This is way too woo-woo for me."
Mhm.
But it is just to know within yourself and to have done it and experienced it, being
Yeah.
able to share it with other people, I don't know, that's just noise. It doesn't really affect me now. I'm like, yeah, you do what works for you, but I know that this work works for people that are ready and open to receiving it.
Yeah, and it changes your life in ways that even you think as you're going through it, oh, this doesn't feel like this is going in the right direction. Maybe it's a loss of a friendship because it no
Mhm,
longer fits anymore. I think I've heard you talk about that a little bit too.
mhm, mhm.
Happened to me, things like that. But then when you look back and you're like, oh, wow, I'm good. This is better because that wasn't healthy or whatever. So sometimes like you just have to trust that when you're doing the work, trust the process, trust that the end result is coming. And like you said, that it's going to be good or probably better than I can imagine. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's there. I mean, it's proven. Like, so many people have walked the path already before you and are, so that, my book was written short for one thing, because I wanted people to be able to get through it. I'm really like stupid busy. Sometimes it's something I want to change in my life, but I'll start a book. And if I get like halfway through and it starts repeating itself too much, okay, done. And
Life
I
is
don't
too
get to,
short for redundancy.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write this short, punchy, quick book to help people get the concept with some tools to get them going. And hopefully there'll be another one after that
Yeah.
that I can do. I see that coming. But I just really wanted that to be the whole goal. I'd always wanted to be an author, but really the goal was to help other people on this journey. And I think I'm so blessed in that because I didn't know, wanting to be an author my whole life, what to write about. And came to me when I'm like, oh, I keep telling myself as I'm doing this work, I want to write a book. I even have a journal entry I found just about a month ago from about 3 or 4 years ago. And it says, I want to write a book, but nobody's going to listen to what I have to say. No, I'm not smart. It was before I had done a lot of this deep dive work. And I was like, isn't that crazy? That's the thing I decided to write about, was the thing that was telling me like I couldn't write.
It's almost
So
like the way that you were connecting with that authentic, like, part of yourself in, like, a total roundabout way, like, almost like a premonition, the only way you
yeah.
knew how to connect with her at that time. It's such a beautiful thing too. I love seeing, like, things I wrote or photos or whatever that remind me of that version of me, because I have so much love for her and respect for her, because
So good.
she brought me to who I am now.
Yeah.
Without the rock bottom, or without those that pain that we experience, like, we truly would not have been able to embark on this work, because it's hard work, and if we didn't have a good reason to do it, we wouldn't. And so I think that's so important to remind ourselves when we're in a healed place of, this is where I came from, and that is such a testament to this, what I've done and what I'm doing with for other people too. So I love
Yeah.
that. Where can we find your book? If you want to get a copy of Brain Bitch on your hands, where do you go?
Yeah. Amazon's going to be your best bet. It's also on Barnes and Noble online, but
Awesome.
Amazon.com. Just write in Brain Bitch. It's going to pop right up. There's not too many other things out there called that right now.
I love it. I
Um,
love reclaiming the power of the word bitch and bringing it back to
Absolutely. And then I
our
have a
selves.
website as well. So on the website, there's links there. And I'm, again, a little hectic, but I'm trying to keep blogging, to keep content, to keep this conversation going with people.
Yeah.
So that's www.brainbitchbook.com. Brainbitch Book.
Awesome. I link everything in the show notes for you. So there is all the convenient ways to get to buying Brain Bitch, whether it's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or Jenny's website. So definitely head over there. I also am linking her socials in there so you guys can continue to interact with her and just really engage more in this work. If you know me, you know how much yoga and mindfulness just and thought work completely changed my life and my healing. And I'm so just honored to be able to share other women doing this work and the way that they are sharing it with the world. I hope to one day to write a book, but like this, it's such an amazing feat. So congratulations on your book.
Thank
And
you.
I hope to see more from you. And it was just such a pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for being here on the B word.
Thank you, Katie, and namaste.
Namaste. What a perfect way to end. That's all for this episode of The B Word. Don't forget to check out the show notes for any resources we shared with you today, as well as finding our links to our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel, and our website, bucommunity.com. You can find out all of our course offerings, memberships, opportunities to work with me individually, and more. That's all for now. See you next time.